Welcome to Alpha. The city of 1,000 planets, where for hundreds of years, every species has shared their knowledge and their intelligence with each other. It's paradise.
Amazing.
Bonjour mes amis, et les autres. A while ago now, the film Valerian came out, and that was by Luc Besson. And we were all very excited for it after The Fifth Element, with a lot of similar influences on it. And it turned out to be very, very pretty, but also pretty disappointing. And at the time, I thought that there must be something more to this. I was excited to see the film and then disappointed, but it was like I could sense there was something more to it. Fortunately, to tie in with the film, there was a mass reissue of Valerian in English in a 7-volume set to be the virtually complete Valerian, at least all the properly official stuff. But yeah, the film was disappointing. So I bought the comics to investigate what it was really all about, and I think I can see where the film went wrong. So Valerian, and then Laureline, his partner, are spatio-temporal agents for Galaxity and the Terran civilization as a whole. As such, they travel through space and time on missions, initially for that organization, but later on for themselves. After the, spoiler alert, Terran civilization is completely erased from the universe. Each of these books comes with part of an interview in the start that tells you all about the history, the people involved in the creation of it, Luc Besson's move to get the film made, and all the rest of it. And this is a comic book that spanned over 40 years that it was in development and in print and being published and so on. So it's had a very big influence on a lot of other artists. Supposedly one of the outfits Laureline wears influenced the Slave Leia outfit, for example, just to pluck one example out of thin air. It's a French comic, or a bande dessinée, or a BD. Sorry, BD. BD is entirely different, by Christian and Mézières. And reading it all ended up giving me a profound sense of sadness and melancholic nostalgia for reading 2000 AD as it was in my youth, when it was far more influenced by European comics and employed quite a lot of European comics artists. Many of the greats who I see echoes of in Valerian, or probably vice versa, are now either gone from the comics industry or from life as a whole. If you're familiar with Massimo Bellardinelli, Carlos Ezequiel, Jesus Redondo, and others, you may recognize echoes back and forth of their styles and ideas and the composition in Valerian that you will see in their work. And to be fair, it's probably Valerian that influenced them rather than vice versa. But yeah, it's all a bit of a mix. And speaking of things being a bit of a mix, Valerian itself is a bit of a chaotic mix. As I said before, it's written over the course of 40 years, so it being a little bit chaotic is hardly surprising. It starts out in a much more cartoony style, a lot more Asterix the Gaul than anything else, and ends on a much more serious, more métal-hurlant, heavy metal sort of style. It becomes much more adult in execution and content as you move forward through the comics, and I've got the first and last of the graphic novel collections here, and it ends on a kind of victorious but downbeat, emotional, melancholic note that very much fits the kind of mood that it put me into. Excuse me, meds. Throughout most of the books, though, what we have here is an almost Doctor Who-like adventure story. Travellers in space and time pitching up in different places and time zones to deal with various weird alien and time-based problems that crop up in those various places. This eventually leads to a massive cosmological threat, but I don't think there was any real plan there for that at the start of the comic. Yeah, it takes a lot of time to get there. It spends a lot of time wending its way around. And its charm as a series comes down a great deal to the strange alien creatures, the nonsense languages, the weird alien vistas, the strange societies, and perhaps most especially the slowly evolving chemistry between the two lead characters, Valerian and Laureline. And I think that relationship is where the film went wrong. In the film, Valerian was completely miscast. In the books, he's a bit more of a traditional male lead, square-jawed, taciturn, capable, but on a more European, James Bondian model, perhaps, than the American action hero. Whereas, in the film, he was a chattering imbecile and an incompetent, constantly being shown up by Laureline, who, in the comics, is much more of an ingenue at the start, with her playful innocence gradually growing into a compassionate spirit as the stories continue. She has her moments to shine, he has his moments to shine. Both of them screw up in some ways. At the start of the comics, she gets captured a lot. Later on, that becomes almost part of their plotting and scheming, using the fact that she might be taken captive to bring their plans to fruition. But really, they complement each other with a very strong story hook of the interplay of masculine and feminine energy, each reinforcing the other in a sort of mutual synergy with one another. There is a great deal to read here, and a great deal of detail and whimsy in the illustrations. So you can come back and you can read them again, and you'll find something new, and you'll grow to appreciate the gradually evolving style of the comics from here, the first collection, to here, the last collection. There's also a lot here you could use, as clearly plenty of other people did, for inspiration if you wanted to create or produce a softer version of Laureline, for example. Or, I'm an inveterate role player. Role playing is what interests me, and you'll find a lot here that you could use if you wanted to run a sort of space opera-y type game, or add a little flavour and colour to alien planets, starships, and so on. I mean, a lot of the aliens are basically humans writ large, but there's also a lot of them that are much more truly alien in a way that I really appreciate and wish we saw more of in science fiction. As I said, I'm a role player. I can't avoid thinking about that when I consume media. And this would, if you'll allow me to be a bit of a shill for a moment, this would be a great source of inspiration for Machinations of the Space Princess, my OSR science fiction game. The film, then, it's a visual feast in its own way. It's massively CGI, but it is still recognisably very Francais, and definitely not American. And it's still worth seeing for that visual spectacle. But the comics are far superior. Something definitely got lost in the transition from comic, which is essentially a storyboard after all, to cinema. I mean, it's always the case, really, isn't it? That the source material is better. It did make me realise, however, that all of this attention at the moment is being put onto Japanese comics. The success of manga, their maturity in some quarters, their relative accessibility and affordability, the sheer variety of storylines, and the way in which they kick Western comics' ass in all sorts of ways. Well, Western comics, by which I really mean the American comics industry. They just double down and double down and double down on things that seem to be driving away the audience to those Japanese comics. Unfortunately, that also means that the same kind of attitudes seem to be infecting Japanese comics as well. I mean, European comics, I'm thinking specifically of French, Italian, and Spanish, but primarily French. They do the same kind of things that the Japanese comics do. They handle mature topics. They're accessible. They tackle adult material. They are not necessarily for kids. So they're a lot freer to tackle things, to be interesting, to retain appeal over a longer time, and not just get stuck in the rut of superheroes, which American comics just can't seem to dig their way out of, save in a shrinking indie scene, with a few exceptions, obviously. But even the Comicsgate people aren't really escaping from that ghetto. They're just better able to swallow that audience that is there and take it away from mainstream American comics. There's a peculiar number of parallels to be drawn between French and Japanese comic style topics and the cultural significance that comics have in Japanese and French society and culture. Yet, here in England, in America, we don't see the same fascination for or appreciation of continental comics as we do for manga. A manga seems much more likely to be translated into English than French comics necessarily are, or Italian comics, or Spanish comics, or whatever else. And it's a shame that continental comics and the appreciation of them is so relegated to comic snobs and the woefully small number of multilingual people in our societies, because there is a hell of a lot out there that is very much worth reading and absorbing. And it's a real shame that heavy metal magazine Metallolin is under such incompetent management. Now, I was going to take out a subscription, but given the sheer incompetence and magazines not going to people and so on of the current custodians of it, I don't feel that I can. But that is what I think we need more of. anthology comics that are willing to be edgy again, to take a risk again, to do something different, to shake things up, because everything is so circumscribed and hemmed in a way that it hasn't been since the Comics Code. And it's all coming from social pressure and crazy people on Twitter. And it's not coming from the creators, and it's certainly not coming from the audience, which I think hungers for the kind of things that manga is fulfilling and Continental Comics could fulfill. À bientôt.
Machinations of the Space Princess is an old-school RPG with a sci-fi setting. The rules are familiar and at once innovative. Opened up so you can play literally any alien species you can envision. Purchase it at RPG Now or Lulu.com.
Une manie de vieux garçon, moi j'ai pris l'habitude d'agrémenter ma solitude aux accents de cette chanson. Quand je pense à Fernande, je bande, je bande. Quand je pense à Félicie, je bande aussi. Quand je pense à Léonore, mon Dieu, je bande encore. Et quand je pense à Lulu, là je ne bande plus. La bandaison, papa, ça ne se commande pas.